Good morning, Hoop Tribe. It's Cassie Chantel. Some of y'all call me Coach C, and this is a special edition of Let's Talk Hoops. I'll call it Hoops Before Coffee. I'm just waking up. I'm also in Kentucky this weekend for the Run for the Roses Championship, and it features some elite talent and teams connected to WNBA players like Natisha Hiedeman, Nafisa Collier, and Kia Nurse, which is ironic because I want to talk about their respective teams before I head over to the tournament. I'll start with the Minnesota Lynx waiving Alyssa Pili. If you followed her in her journey, you know this one hurts. She's strong, skilled, and can knock down shots, but the Lynx are in win now mode. I don't want to go as far as to say that they're scrambling because this is a vetted coaching system. They've seen it all, but I think that this move is a huge indicator that there are sirens going off in that front office. I don't think that this move necessarily is about talent. It was a decision rooted in urgency that will essentially lead to them making a move for a more experienced player. I don't know who that will be, but I anticipate them looking internationally. We'll probably hear about some players that participated in Eurobasket or America. Minnesota has historically only gambled on players who are disciplined and undeniable in terms of young players and playing time. Peely has had flashes, but when you're only getting short minutes with no real rhythm, it's hard to show who you are. In college, she was the go-to, high usage, high volume player. Now she's trying to find her way in a system that's rigid and prioritizes execution over experimentation. I would love to see her in a place like Atlanta, a team that could use her spacing, strength, and presence on the glass. But with the trade deadline approaching and limited roster spots, most teams aren't thinking about development. They're thinking postseason. There's also the broader issue in Minnesota, Cheryl Reeve's rotations or lack thereof. The Lynx bench has barely touched the floor in losses, and it's starting to show. You look back to the Commissioner's Cup where people question if Reeve sabotaged her team for whatever narrative, whether it had been to avoid the cup curse or people thinking there's this agenda for the Indiana Fever to win it all. I don't think that those conspiracies hold up. Over the Lynx losses, Diamond Miller and Maria Vandiva averaged 4 minutes apiece. Natisha Hiedeman has averaged 12, which is one of the highest, but in those losses, she's underproduced, especially when you look at how she's performed in the beginning of the season. In the post game, after the loss to Chicago, Kayla McBride and Nafisa Collier both spoke to how they aren't starting games well. That's something I noticed in the beginning of the season when they were winning. I commented on how these wins weren't clean wins and they were skating by at times because they're an experienced and overall disciplined team. But when you're digging yourself into holes in the first half of play and you play against a team that's playing as a unit and scoring, it's hard to dig yourself out of that. You can't expect long-term success with that short of a rotation and the starters aren't performing as expected. Reeve is frustrated. In the post-game press conference, she said maybe teams have more of a will to win than they do, which to me felt like a bit of foreshadowing. In that tone, I could hear, oh, she's about to shake the table. Something has got to give, and I think Alyssa Peely was that, and that's unfortunate for her, but I don't think that this is the end of her WNBA experience. Meanwhile, the Chicago Sky are starting to figure it out. They were judged harshly at the beginning of the season. I'm one of those people that judge them. And honestly, they deserved it. I don't take anything I've said about them back. This is sports. This is how conversations are. And instead of folding, they responded. They leaned on each other, gave themselves grace, and locked in. After the win, Angel Reese said it felt like being back on the blacktop in Baltimore. And you can see that in the way that they're playing, free, physical, and unbothered. Ariel Atkins spoke to their focus post-game. That's the difference between where they were and where they are now. And let's talk about that GM moment too. When he called out Angel publicly, fans were defensive, me included, and understandably so. If you don't remember, he said, "It's a long season and there's a lot of games left, but this is unexpected. I've been very disappointed. We had pretty big, significant expectations for this season. That's why I made the moves that I made." Speaking to his moves with Courtney Vandersloot and Kia Nurse, he continued by referencing Reese, saying she's had some great games and she's had some games like everybody else that haven't been her best, but she's our best chance at versatility on this roster. We need more production out of her, but we need her to help us in other ways too. My point was, at the time that he said this, Angel was already doing a lot Even with the team playing poorly, many of the times she was their brightest spot, and the offense was being experimented with in ways that she had to adjust her game to a new role and essentially a new position from what she had played the last 5 or so years as a college player and now pro. I was like, give her a break, especially when these moves you're referring to weren't the strongest of moves for her development, in my opinion. But we move on. In hindsight, that interview might have been exactly what she needed. Sometimes that kind of accountability, especially when it's uncomfortable, lights a fire, and Angel has responded with poise, production, and pride, and that's who she is and who she's been. Adversity fuels her like no other player I've seen outside of Kobe Bryant. I don't know if there's been another player in the women's game who has had to deal with all of the criticism and downright nastiness that Angel has had to deal with at this magnitude. No, I'm not saying other players haven't dealt with things. I'm old enough to remember having to be escorted into buildings by sheriffs to play against teams because their fans would scream racial slurs at us and throw things when we played teams in sundown towns. So I know that nastiness has been a part of the game for players that look like us, but social media and the media in general are at a whole new level, and that makes things different, period. Another name that deserves love and praise for Chicago is Rachel Banham. She's been the glue. With Sloot out, she's really stepped into the PG role and brought stability. She's not flashy, but she's exactly what the Sky needed, and that matters. She's averaging 7 points and 2 assists, but in the win over the Lynx, she had 12 and 5. She's a knockdown scorer, and initially that was her role, but she has really transitioned and been able to just be whatever they need her to be. Ariel Atkins has been the star that they brought her in to be. 27 points in the win over the Lynx. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. Chicago will be more successful if they continue to get these kind of games out of Ariel Atkins. They need her scoring 20 plus points. That's just the bottom line. And if she can maintain that pace, she'll eventually shut these people up that said that she wasn't worth the first round pick. Michaela Onyenwere was good on the glass, but we're still not seeing who she can be offensively. And when that side of her does eventually unlock, Chicago might be that upset team to shake up the postseason. So here's where we are. Peely is out of Minnesota. The Lynx have deep questions to answer about trust, rotations, and how they start games. Chicago is surging heading into the second half of the season, and I think it's a mark of what's about to come. The second half of the season may end up flipping the rankings. There's been a few underdog wins lately. The Washington Mystics upsetting the Aces, the Connecticut Sun upsetting the Seattle Storm. Things are about to get interesting. I'll be here in Kentucky covering the AAU circuit, so be sure to follow Women's Basketball 365 for stories, takeaways, and maybe even future W stars in the making. And of course, for more full-length episodes of Let's Talk Hoops that I typically drop on Sunday evenings. With the travel, I don't know when I'll be able to drop episode 12, but I will check back in when I can. I won't leave you hanging. But what are your thoughts, Hoops Tribe? Let's talk hoops.